The millionaire's son was born deaf until the maid did the inexplicable. Ignored by specialists and rejected by everyone, the boy lived trapped in a silence that even money couldn't break. But a single touch from the young cleaning woman turned tears into peace and chaos into affection. What followed was a social scandal, forbidden love, legal threats, and the fight of an ordinary woman against the prejudice of the powerful. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Continuing. The sun was rising over the horizon of Park Avenue when Julian Montgomery finished signing the last document. The penthouse office in New York City's tallest building offered a privileged view of the city that never slept, but his eyes could no longer appreciate the beauty of that panorama. For 8 months, ever since Claire had passed away after childbirth complications, the world had lost its colors. "Mr. Montgomery, your coffee is on the table." His secretary, Monica, placed the imported porcelain cup on the mahogany desk. "Thank you, Monica. The Sunrise construction contracts have been signed. You can send them to the legal department." His voice sounded automatic, as if programmed to maintain the appearance of normalcy. As the woman left, Julian swiveled, his chair to watch the sunrise, a ritual he had shared daily with Claire. "Another day without you," he thought, feeling the weight of the hours that awaited him. He checked his watch, 7:15 a.m. In 15 minutes, he needed to be home for the nanny shift change, the third in less than 2 months. The exclusive elevator took him directly to the garage, where his driver was already waiting next to the black Porsche. In less than 20 minutes, they arrived at the luxury gated community in Bel Air. The mansion, designed by an award-winning architect, had been Julian's gift to Claire when they discovered her pregnancy. Now, the vast space only amplified the absence. Upon entering, he was greeted by the cries of Michael, his 3-year-old son. The boy, diagnosed with congenital deafness, communicated through guttural sounds that echoed off the marble walls. The nanny, with deep, dark circles under her eyes, tried unsuccessfully to calm him. "He's been like this since 5 in the morning, sir. I couldn't get him to sleep or eat." The young woman had disheveled hair and wrinkled clothes. "I'm so sorry, but I can't continue. I've tried everything." Julian sighed, resigned. It wasn't the first time he had heard those words. Ever since Claire had passed, no nanny had lasted more than a few weeks. Michael, despite his tender age, seemed to feel his mother's absence with devastating intensity. "All right, Felicity. I'll arrange your payment. You can go." The young woman didn't even wait for a second confirmation. She grabbed her bag and left in a hurry, leaving Julian alone with his son. The businessman approached Michael, who was struggling on the living room floor. He tried to pick him up, but the boy dodged him, crawling away and hiding under the coffee table. "Son, please." Julian knelt, extending his hand. "It's me, Daddy." Michael only intensified his screams, rejecting any contact. His eyes, so similar to Claire's, were red and swollen from crying so much. Julian felt a lump in his throat. How could he run a real estate empire if he couldn't even calm his own son? He picked up his cell phone and called the premium nanny agency. He urgently needed someone with experience with children with special needs. The attendant, already familiar with his frequent requests, promised to send a professional that very morning. While waiting, he tried again to approach Michael. He sat on the floor at a safe distance and began to make the basic signs he had learned from the speech therapist. "Daddy, love and food." The boy completely ignored him, huddled in his corner. The intercom rang. It was the gatehouse announcing the arrival of the new nanny. Julian took a deep breath, preparing for another frustrated attempt. Lucille Baker, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, introduced herself as a specialist in deaf children. Her experience seemed impressive: 15 years working with special education, fluency in ASL, a postgraduate degree in psychopedagogy. "Where is the little one?" she asked, looking around critically. Julian pointed to the coffee table where Michael remained hidden. Lucille approached with firm steps and tried to pull him by the arm. The result was immediate. The boy reacted with a deafening scream and a kick that hit the woman's shin. "How absurd! This child needs boundaries," she exclaimed, indignant. "He's going through a difficult time." Julian tried to explain, but the woman was already collecting her bag. "I'm sorry, Mr. Montgomery, but I don't work with undisciplined children, not for all the money in the world." And so, in less than 15 minutes, Julian found himself alone with Michael again. He called the office, cancelling all meetings for the day. He had no choice but to stay with his son. The hours dragged on. Julian tried everything. He put cartoons on television, offered his favorite toys, prepared the food Michael usually accepted. Nothing worked. The boy refused to eat, play, or sleep. He only cried in a lament that seemed endless. At night, when Michael finally fell asleep from exhaustion, Julian allowed himself to collapse onto the sofa. Silent tears streamed down his face as he watched his son sleeping restlessly. How had they reached that point? How could he be considered one of the most powerful men in New York City if he couldn't even provide comfort to his own son? His cell phone vibrated. It was Marcus, his longtime partner and friend. "How are things, Julian?" "Terrible." Another nanny quit. Maybe it's time to consider other options. A specialized institution, perhaps. The suggestion hit Julian like a punch to the stomach. He knew Marcus had good intentions, but he would never put Michael in an institution. He was his son, his responsibility, all that remained of Claire. "No way, Marcus, I'll find a solution. You can't go on like this, my friend. You missed 3 important meetings this week. Investors are starting to question your leadership ability. Let them question. Michael comes first." After hanging up, Julian looked at his sleeping son. He needed to be strong for him, to find a way. Tomorrow would be another day, another attempt. Perhaps he should consult new specialists, seek other approaches. In the silence of the night, he swore to himself that he wouldn't give up. For Michael, for Claire, for the 3 of them, the family they almost had. He fell asleep right there, on the rug beside his son, dreaming of the sound of laughter that hadn't echoed in that house for a long time. In south-central Los Angeles, the alarm clock rang insistently at 4:30 a.m. Rachel Sterling fumbled in the dark until she found the button and silenced it. The small room barely fit the single bed and the old wardrobe, but it was the home she and Mrs. Zelda, her mother, managed to keep with great sacrifice. She got up quietly, trying not to wake her mother, who was sleeping in the next room. Mrs. Zelda suffered from advanced rheumatoid arthritis and needed to rest as much as possible. Each day was a battle against pain, each movement a Herculean effort. The medications were expensive, specialized treatment inaccessible for someone surviving on a minimum disability pension. Rachel prepared strong coffee and set out her mother's pills for the day. She left everything organized on the kitchen table, along with a loving note. "Mom, there's cornbread in the fridge. I'll be back late afternoon. I love you." At 5:15 a.m., she was already at the bus stop. The commute to downtown Los Angeles took almost 2 hours, time she used to study ASL on her phone. She had started learning sign language when she worked as a cleaning assistant at an inclusive school. The experience had only lasted 6 months, but it had sparked in her a passion for gestural communication. That Wednesday morning, Rachel had 3 houses to clean: an apartment in Greenwich Village in the morning, another in Chelsea in the early afternoon, and finally a townhouse in the Upper West Side. The exhausting routine brought in little over $2,000 a month, barely enough to cover rent, bills, and Mrs. Zelda's medications. Her cell phone vibrated as she got off the bus. It was Marilyn, her friend who worked at a cleaning agency specializing in luxury properties. "Rachel, I need you tonight. Emergency at an apartment in Bel Air. VIP client. Pays triple the hourly rate." "Marilyn, you know I can't leave my mum alone until late. It's just for tonight, and the money would buy that new medicine the doctor prescribed for Mrs. Zelda." Rachel hesitated. The imported medicine cost almost a month's rent, but it promised to considerably alleviate her mother's pain. "All right. What time?" 7 p.m. "I'll send the address by text. Thanks, friend. You saved me." The day proceeded. As usual, floors scrubbed, bathrooms sanitized, furniture polished. Rachel worked diligently, although she knew she was practically invisible to the owners of the houses she cleaned. Sometimes an entire week would pass without her encountering them. It was just bank transfers and notes with instructions. At 6 p.m., she called her neighbor, Mrs. Alice, asking her to check on her mother. She promised not to be late and thanked her in advance with the promise of a cornbread on the weekend. That's how it worked in the community, a network of solidarity that supported those most in need. The address sent by Marilyn led her to one of the most luxurious gated communities in Bel Air. At the gatehouse, the security guard scrutinized her from head to toe before authorizing her entry. A uniformed employee accompanied her to the elevator, inserting a special card that granted access to the penthouse. Mr. Montgomery has a plumbing problem in the master suite bathroom, a leak that's damaging the ceiling on the floor below, the employee explained, without looking directly at her. He has a small child, so I ask that you work quietly. Rachel nodded, accustomed to being treated with that professional detachment. The B. Elevator opened directly into the antechamber of the duplex penthouse. A man of approximately 40 years old, with deep dark circles under his eyes and an exhausted expression, awaited her. Good evening. I'm Julian Montgomery. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Rachel was momentarily surprised by the polite formality. It wasn't common for employers to introduce themselves or express gratitude. Rachel Sterling. The agency explained about the leak. Yes, it's in the master suite bathroom. Please follow me. As they walked through the spacious apartment, Rachel couldn't help but notice the contrast between the luxury of the environment and the evident disarray. There were toys scattered, dishes in the sink, clothes on the sofa. It didn't seem like a typical millionaire's home. Sorry about the mess, Julian commented as if reading her thoughts. Things have been complicated lately. Rachel merely smiled politely. It wasn't her place to judge. Julian led her to the master bathroom, pointing to a dark stain on the ceiling. It started yesterday. I've already called a plumber, but he can only come tomorrow. I needed someone to contain the damage and clean up the mess before it got worse. As Rachel examined the problem, a sharp sound cut through the silence. A desperate and distressing child's cry came from another room. Julian closed his eyes for an instant, as if seeking strength. It's my son, Michael. He has trouble sleeping. Rachel nodded, concentrating on the task. She opened her toolbox and began to work. The leak was simple to contain temporarily. An improvised seal would hold until the plumber arrived. As she cleaned the affected area, the child's crying continued, growing more intense by the minute. Excuse me. Julian left in a hurry. Rachel continued working, but the crying didn't stop. On the contrary, it intensified with each passing minute. She could hear the man's voice trying to calm his son without success. There was a tone of desperation in his words that moved her. Having finished the work in the bathroom, Rachel collected her materials. The protocol would be to inform the client and leave, but something about that crying deeply bothered her. She recognized in it the same anguish she had felt at 8 years old when her father abandoned the family. The emptiness that no toy or word could fill. Following the sound, she reached the ajar door of a child's bedroom decorated in shades of blue and green. Julian was sitting on the floor, trying to reach a small boy who was hiding under the bed, screaming incessantly. Michael, please, Daddy's here. Rachel observed the scene for a few moments. She noticed the man making clumsy gestures with his hands, rudimentary attempts at communication in ASL. The boy was deaf. Without thinking much, she lightly knocked on the door. Julian turned, surprised and embarrassed. Sorry to interrupt. The service is completed. Thank you, I'll get the payment. He stood up, visibly tired. May I? Rachel hesitated, knowing she was overstepping professional boundaries. Is your son deaf? Julian stared at her for a moment as if assessing her intentions. Yes, profound congenital deafness. Rachel looked at the boy, who continued crying, oblivious to her presence. I know a little ASL, if you don't mind. Julian stepped aside in a silent gesture of permission. Rachel entered the room and knelt at a respectful distance from the boy. She waited for him to notice her before she began to sign. Hi, Michael. My name is Rachel. Her fingers formed the signs with fluency and delicacy. The boy stopped crying for an instant, watching her with wide eyes. It was probably the first time he had seen someone other than his father trying to communicate in his language. You have a beautiful room. I like your dinosaurs, Rachel continued, pointing to the scattered toys. To Julian's absolute astonishment, Michael slowly emerged from his hiding place and approached the stranger. His little eyes, red from crying so much, studied her hand movements with fascination. Do you want to show me your favorite toy? Rachel signed. The boy hesitated, looked at his father, then at her. Then, for the first time in weeks, Michael smiled shyly and extended his little arms towards her. Julian watched the scene with a mixture of disbelief and relief. His son, who for weeks had rejected all human contact, was now sitting on the rug, playing peacefully beside the cleaner, who had come to fix a leak. Michael held a plush dinosaur in one hand, while with the other, he tried to imitate the signs Rachel showed him. How did you do that? Julian asked in a low voice, fearing to break that almost magical moment. Rachel smiled without diverting her attention from the boy. I worked at an inclusive school for a few months. I learned the basics of ASL there. She made a few more signs for Michael, who responded with enthusiasm. He knows a lot of signs for his age. The speech therapist comes twice a week. I also try to learn, but Julian ran his hand through his disheveled hair. I'm not very good at it. It's a language like any other. It takes time. Michael tugged on Rachel's sleeve, signing something Julian couldn't understand. She responded with fluid hand movements, and the boy smiled, running to a bookshelf to grab a storybook. He wants me to tell a story, Rachel explained, looking slightly embarrassed. But it's already late, and I need to go home. My mother is waiting for me. Panic flashed across Julian's face. The idea that this woman would leave and take with her the first real connection Michael had made in months was unbearable. Please, he heard himself pleading, stay a little longer. I can pay double, triple your hourly rate. Rachel bit her lower lip, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. It's not about money, Mr. Montgomery. My mother has health problems. I can't leave her alone for too long. Michael returned with the book, handing it to Rachel with pleading eyes. She looked at the clock, almost 9 p.m. Mrs. Zelda would already be worried. One story. She finally agreed, unable to resist the boy's gaze. Just one, quick, and then I need to go. Julian watched, marveling, as Rachel transformed each page of the book into a dance of hands and expressions. Michael, sitting on her lap, absorbed every movement with absolute fascination. It was the first time in weeks he had seen him so calm, so present. When the story ended, Michael was already yawning. Rachel helped him lie down in bed and signed goodnight. To the surprise of both adults, the boy fell asleep almost immediately, without crying, without resistance. In the hallway, far enough away not to disturb Michael's sleep, Julian looked at Rachel with gratitude and determination. I want to hire you. Not as a cleaner, but as Michael's caregiver. What? Rachel blinked, taken by surprise. I don't have the training for that. I only know a little ASL. I'm not an educator. But you have something none of the specialists who came through here had, a connection with him. Julian spoke softly but with intensity. I can pay 5 times what you currently earn. Full-time on the payroll with full benefits, health insurance that will cover you and your mother. Rachel's heart quickened. Health insurance for Mrs. Zelda meant access to the specialized treatment they so desperately needed. 5 times her current salary would allow them to move to a better apartment, closer to doctors. It was tempting, almost irresistible. I need to think about it, she finally replied. It's a very big change in my life. I understand. Julian took a card from his pocket and wrote his personal number on the back. Call me tomorrow, please, regardless of your decision. In the taxi on the way home, Rachel couldn't organize her thoughts. Everything had happened so fast. That morning it was just another day of hard work. Now she held a proposal that could completely change her life and her mother's. Mrs. Zelda was still awake when she arrived, watching a soap opera on the small living room television. You took a long time, dear. I was worried. Sorry, Mum. Rachel kissed her mother's forehead and sat beside her. Something strange happened today. As she recounted the evening's events, she observed her mother's reactions. Mrs. Zelda had always been her safe harbor, her wisest counselor. "So what do you think?" she asked after concluding the story. "It seems too good to be true," her mother commented cautiously. "This man, this Julian fellow, what? Do you know about him?" "Only that he's rich, has a deaf son, and seems desperate for help." "Exactly. Desperation can make people promise things they can't deliver." Mrs. Zelda adjusted herself in the armchair with a grimace of pain. "What if he changes his mind after a few weeks? You would have abandoned your other clients." Rachel knew her mother was right. It was a considerable risk. But the image of Michael, that lonely boy in his gilded cage, wouldn't leave her mind. "I'll think about it until tomorrow. Now let's go to sleep. It's already late." The next morning, after a restless night, Rachel made her decision. She called Julian and accepted the proposal, with one condition. She would start with a 1-month trial period. If either party was not satisfied, they could terminate the agreement without hard feelings. Julian agreed immediately, without negotiating. The urgency in his voice confirmed what Rachel had already perceived. He was at his limit. A week later, Rachel began her new job. She arrived at 8 a.m. and left at 6 p.m., 5 days a week. Initially, her role was to care for Michael, but she soon realized the entire house needed attention. There were no permanent staff apart from the driver, and a woman who came twice a week to cook and do laundry. The first few days were for adaptation. Michael received her with enthusiasm, but he had moments of irritability and frustration. Rachel realized that in addition to his deafness, the boy carried a deep trauma from his mother's absence. According to Julian, Claire had suffered postpartum complications that kept her hospitalized for months until she passed away. Michael, still a baby, had lived his first years with a constant rotation of nannies and nurses, without the chance to form stable bonds. Gradually, Rachel established a routine. In the morning, educational games that reinforced ASL learning. After lunch, an hour of rest followed by outdoor activities in the mansion's garden. In the afternoon, stories, games, and twice a week, the speech therapist's visit. Julian, initially distant, began to modify his routine. He started having lunch at home daily, monitoring his son's progress. On some afternoons, he would arrive earlier from the office to participate in playtime. Rachel noticed with satisfaction that he genuinely made an effort to learn more signs and communicate better with Michael. At the end of the second week, she suggested, "You should participate in the sessions with the speech therapist. It would be good for Michael to see both of you learning together. Do you think so?" Julian seemed unsure. "I don't want to hinder his progress. I'm sure. And you can call me Rachel. I think we're past that formality." He smiled, and Rachel noticed how his eyes lit up when he was relaxed. He was a handsome man when he wasn't carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Only if you call me Julian." The trial month passed quickly. Michael's transformation was evident to everyone. The boy smiled more, communicated better, and most importantly had established a healthy sleep and eating routine. The house had come alive again. On a Friday afternoon, while Michael was playing in the garden under the gardener's supervision, Julian called Rachel for a conversation in his office. "The trial month ends today." "Yes, I know," she replied, feeling a tightening in her chest. She had grown more attached to Michael than she had imagined possible. "I want to make you a new proposal." Julian indicated the chair in front of him. "I've been talking with the speech therapist. He thinks Michael would need complete immersion in ASL to progress more quickly. That would mean having someone who communicates fluently with him throughout the day." "I agree. He has the potential to learn much more. That's why I'd like you to consider moving in here." Julian spoke quickly, as if fearing he would lose his courage. "We have a guest room downstairs that could be yours. I would adjust your salary, of course, and your mother could come too. There's enough space." Rachel was momentarily speechless. The proposal was even more surprising than the first. "Julian, I don't know what to say. It's a very big decision. I understand perfectly," he hastened to say. "You don't need to answer now. Think carefully, talk to your mother. But know that regardless of your decision about moving in, I really want you to continue working with us. Michael," his voice faltered slightly. "Michael needs you." Rachel nodded, feeling the weight of those words. It wasn't just Michael who needed her. That entire house, that whole small family universe, was being rebuilt with her help, and to her surprise, she was also starting to need them. 3 months passed since Rachel had accepted Julian's proposal. After much reflection and conversations with Mrs. Zelda, she decided that moving into the mansion was the best option. Her mother, initially reluctant, eventually agreed upon meeting Michael and witnessing the transformation her daughter brought about in that family. The guest wing of the house was adapted to accommodate both of them. Mrs. Zelda gained a spacious room with an adapted bathroom for her needs and a small living area where she could watch her soap operas and receive the new friends she had made in the community. Rachel occupied the room next door, simple but comfortable, with a small balcony overlooking the garden. The routine in the Montgomery mansion took on a new rhythm. In the morning, Rachel and Michael had formal ASL lessons, now with a specialized teacher who came 3 times a week. Mrs. Zelda, surprisingly, also participated in the lessons, showing an unexpected aptitude for gestural communication despite her arthritis-stiffened fingers. Julian completely reorganized his professional schedule. He left the office promptly at 5 p.m. to be home for dinner. On Fridays, he didn't work in the afternoon, dedicating that time exclusively to Michael. Weekends were reserved for outings: the zoo, the park, movies with subtitles, children's theater adapted for deaf children. The improvised family gradually found its own balance. One Sunday afternoon, while Rachel helped Mrs. Zelda with physical therapy exercises in the garden, Julian and Michael played in the pool. The boy, wearing arm floats, tried to swim to his father, who encouraged him with enthusiastic gestures. "He's so different," Mrs. Zelda commented, observing the scene. "When we arrived here, he barely looked anyone in the eye." Rachel smiled, carefully adjusting her mother's arm position. Michael just needed to feel safe again. To feel that he wouldn't be abandoned. And his father, too. Her mother cast a meaningful glance at her daughter. "Julian looks at you in a special way, you know." "Mom!" Rachel felt her face flush. "Don't start that. Our relationship is strictly professional, if you say so." Mrs. Zelda shrugged, a mischievous smile on her lips. "I just find it curious how he always finds an excuse to be in the same room as you." Rachel tried to ignore the comment, but couldn't help but notice how her heart quickened slightly when she thought of Julian. In recent months, they had developed a comfortable friendship. After Michael went to sleep, they often met in the living room to talk about the boy's progress, which soon turned into conversations about books, movies, dreams, and fears. She knew she was treading on dangerous ground. Julian was her employer, a man from a completely different world than hers. Any feeling beyond friendship would be inappropriate, even foolish. "Rachel!" Michael ran to her, dripping water all the way. With wet hands, he enthusiastically signed, "Daddy said we're going to the water park on Saturday. How wonderful!" Rachel replied in ASL, smiling. "It's going to be so much fun." "You're coming too, aren't you?" Julian asked, approaching with a towel to dry his son. "Michael is already planning which rides you two will explore together." "Of course I will," she replied, avoiding his gaze. "If you don't mind, could Mrs. Zelda come too? There's a thermal waters area that would be excellent for her joints, obviously." Julian ran his hand through his wet hair. "We're a family now, aren't we? We'll all go together." The word family hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken meanings. Michael, oblivious to the subtle tension, tugged on Rachel's hand, wanting to show her a new movement he had learned in the water. That night, after putting Michael to sleep, Rachel found Julian on the balcony, contemplating the illuminated city. He held a glass of wine, and there was another on the small table beside him, apparently waiting for her. "I thought you might like some wine," he explained as she approached. "To celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "6 months since you came into our lives." Julian handed her the glass. "Do you know what the speech therapist told me today? That Michael is 2 years ahead in his linguistic development for a child with profound deafness. 2 years, Rachel. And that's thanks to you." She felt her face flush at the sincere compliment. "It's thanks to all of us. You, Mrs. Zelda, the teachers. Everyone contributed. Don't be modest." He took a small sip of wine. "Before you, we were just 2 strangers sharing the same house. Now we are a family," she completed, repeating the word he had used earlier. "Yes, His eyes met hers with a new intensity. A family. The moment was interrupted by Julian's cell phone ringing. He looked at the screen and his expression immediately changed. "I need to take this." "Excuse me." He moved a few steps away, speaking in a low voice. Rachel tried not to pay attention, but it was impossible not to notice the growing tension in his posture. "No, Augustus, this is not negotiable." Julian's voice hardened. "I don't care what you think. Michael is happy and healthy, that's all that matters. No, I will not reconsider. The conversation is over." When he hung up, his face was pale. "Is there a problem?" Rachel asked, concerned. Julian hesitated as if weighing his words. That was Augustus, Claire's cousin. He's the legal trustee of the assets Claire left for Michael. I didn't know there was a trustee. Claire came from a traditional family. When we married, her father insisted that part of the family fortune be placed in a trust for our future children. After she passed, Augustus took over the administration of that trust, as stipulated by the will. And is that a problem? It shouldn't be. Julian sighed. The money can only be accessed when Michael turns 21. Until then, a small portion is released annually to cover his education and special needs. So why did he call? Augustus is going through financial difficulties. He made some bad investments and lost a lot of money. Julian sat back down beside her. He wants me to buy his share in the family business, but I have no interest. It's a decaying business, managed in an antiquated way, and that bothered him. He doesn't take no for an answer. Never has. Julian took a sip of wine. Don't worry. It's just a family. Annoyance. Nothing to worry about. But there was something in Julian's tone that left Rachel uneasy. That night she had trouble sleeping, with an uncomfortable premonition that the phone call was just the beginning of something bigger. The next morning, a limousine pulled up to the mansion's entrance. A tall man, aristocratic in appearance and impeccably dressed, was announced by the housekeeper. "Mr. Augustus Albright to see you, Mr. Montgomery." Julian, who was having breakfast with Michael and Rachel, visibly stiffened. "Please take him to the office. Tell him I'll be there in a minute." After the housekeeper left, he turned to Rachel. "Can you stay with Michael? I don't want him to meet Augustus right now." "Of course," she replied, sensing the gravity in his voice. "We'll finish breakfast in the room, won't we, Michael?" The boy, sensing the tension in the air, nodded without protest. As they were leaving the dining room, Augustus appeared at the door, ignoring the instruction to wait in the office. "Julian, my dear cousin, aren't you going to introduce me to your staff?" There was a tone of disdain in the word staff that did not go unnoticed by Rachel. She instinctively placed her hand on Michael's shoulder, as if to protect him. "Augustus." Julian's voice came out controlled but cold. "I thought I made it clear yesterday that we have nothing to discuss. On the contrary." Augustus smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We have a lot to discuss, especially concerning the well-being of my great-nephew." His gaze fell upon Rachel, examining her from head to toe. "You must be the caregiver, aren't you?" "Rachel Sterling. I've heard a lot about you." "Yes, that's me," she replied firmly, holding his gaze. "And you are?" "Augustus Albright, trustee of Michael's trust fund." He extended his hand, which Rachel briefly shook. Fascinating how someone without specific training in special education has achieved so much progress with the boy. Almost miraculous, I'd say. The sarcasm was evident, and Rachel felt her face flush. "There's nothing miraculous about dedication and affection, Mr. Albright." "Certainly." He smiled again, that same calculated smile. "And you must be Mrs. Zelda, the ailing mother who also moved in here. What a convenient arrangement." Mrs. Zelda, who had just entered the room with the aid of her cane, straightened her posture as much as her aching body allowed. "You seem to know a lot about us, Mr. Albright. Too bad we can't say the same." Augustus laughed, an artificial and hollow sound. "A very close family." "I see, how touching." "Augustus, that's enough." Julian intervened, his voice filled with authority. "If you came here to insult my guests, you can turn around and leave." "Guests? Is that what you call them?" He raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. But I didn't come here to create conflict, Julian. I just came to check on my dear great-nephew. It's my duty as trustee." Michael, who was silently observing the scene, clung to Rachel's leg, clearly uncomfortable with the stranger's presence. "As you can see, Michael is perfectly fine," Julian stated. "Now, if you'll excuse me, we have a day planned." Of course. Augustus adjusted his jacket. "Just remember, cousin, appearances can be deceiving, and certain situations can be misinterpreted by outside observers." With those enigmatic words, he bid farewell with a brief nod and left, leaving a heavy silence in the dining room. What did he mean by that? Mrs. Zelda asked, concerned. Julian seemed lost in thought, his expression grim. "I'm not sure, but Augustus never makes empty threats." He knelt to be at Michael's height and signed, "It's all right, son. Daddy won't let anything happen to you." Rachel and Mrs. Zelda exchanged apprehensive glances. The sunny morning had been suddenly clouded by a worry that no one could clearly name. But everyone could feel, that afternoon, while Michael was napping, Rachel found Julian in his office, surrounded by papers and with a tense expression. "May I come in?" she asked hesitantly. He looked up and his face softened instantly. "Of course. I was just thinking of looking for you." Rachel sat in the chair opposite him, observing the unusual mess on the always organized desk. "Julian, what's going on? Who really is this Augustus, and why did he seem to threaten us?" He sighed deeply, pushing the papers aside. "Augustus is dangerous, Rachel. Not because he's violent, but because he's influential and desperate." His eyes met hers. "And I believe he sees you as a threat." "Me? Why?" "Because you achieved what no one else could, transforming this house into a home, making Michael happy, and possibly—" He hesitated as if weighing his next words. "Because he realized you've become important to me, too." "Very important." Rachel's heart quickened, but she maintained her composure. "What does that have to do with Michael's money?" "Everything. If I rebuild my life, if Michael has a stable family, Augustus loses any chance to influence decisions about the trust. In Claire's will, there's a clause that states if I remarry and the new spouse legally adopts Michael, the administration of the trust automatically passes to us." "And he fears that will happen?" Rachel asked, feeling her face burn as she realized the implication. "Exactly." Julian gazed at her with intensity. "And I believe he will do anything to prevent it." Augustus's visit was just the beginning. In the following weeks, a series of small incidents began to disturb the Montgomery family's newly found peace. First, there were anonymous calls in the middle of the night. Then, unidentified sources began feeding sensationalist tabloids with stories about the scandalous romance between the widowed millionaire and the housekeeper. Photos taken from a distance during weekend outings appeared on gossip websites with suggestive headlines. Has businessman Julian Montgomery already overcome his grief? Housekeeper takes on matriarchal role in Millionaire's mansion. The new mother of the deaf heir, who is Rachel Sterling, the woman who captured one of New York City's most coveted bachelors. From cleaner to socialite. Rachel Sterling's modern fairy tale. Rachel felt exposed, vulnerable. Even in the gated community, she noticed curious glances and whispered comments when she passed with Michael. Mrs. Zelda, always protective, suggested more than once that it might be better for them to return to their old apartment. "These high society people won't accept us, dear. To them, we'll always be the opportunists." "It doesn't matter what they think, Mum," Rachel replied firmly. "What matters is Michael. He needs us." But the pressure increased day by day. On a particularly tense afternoon, Rachel was approached outside the grocery store by a woman who introduced herself as a reporter for a celebrity magazine. "Miss Sterling, is it true that you and Julian Montgomery are already planning a wedding? Close sources claim you've already signed a multi-million-dollar prenuptial agreement." Rachel felt her blood run cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm just his son's caregiver. A caregiver who lives in the mansion, travels with the family, and has taken on the maternal role for little Michael." The woman smiled, predatory. "Come on, you can tell us. What's it like to win over one of the richest men in the country?" Rachel quickly got into the car where Julian's driver was waiting for her, ignoring the reporter's insistent questions. Throughout the entire ride back, her heart hammered in her chest. How did that woman know so many details about her life? At home, she found Julian in his office on the phone, with a furious expression he rarely showed. I don't care what they threaten to publish. He practically yelled at the caller. It's all lies and you know it. Lawsuit for defamation. Immediately. When he hung up, he noticed Rachel's presence at the door. Did something happen? She asked hesitantly. Julian ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Rachel already recognized as a sign of extreme frustration. Celebrity Confidential wants to publish a cover story suggesting that you, he hesitated, suggesting that you're in a relationship with Michael only to manipulate me. That your goal has always been money. Rachel felt her legs weaken and had to lean against the door. How can they say something like that? They don't even know me, Augustus. The name came out as a growl. I'm sure he's feeding these stories. He's trying to tarnish our image, create a narrative he can use legally against us. Legally? What do you mean? Julian indicated a chair, inviting her to sit. My lawyer called me earlier today. Augustus filed a petition for review of Michael's custody. What? Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. He can't do that. You're the father. He alleges that I'm exposing Michael to a morally questionable and potentially harmful situation for his development. Julian quoted, his voice laden with bitterness. According to him, bringing a woman without proper training, with an ambiguous relationship with me, into the home would be confusing Michael and harming his emotional stability. Rachel covered her mouth with her hands, horrified. That's absurd. Michael has never been better. I know. Julian took her hands in his. And we'll fight this with all our might. I've already hired the best lawyers. The judge scheduled a preliminary hearing for next month. That night, after Michael fell asleep, Rachel talked at length with Mrs. Zelda. Her mother, despite her fragile health, maintained a lucidity and wisdom that always guided Rachel through difficult times. What do you truly feel for him, dear? Mrs. Zelda asked directly. Rachel hesitated. It was a question she had been avoiding asking herself. I care very much for Julian, and I love Michael as if he were my own. I already know that. The elderly woman smiled tenderly, but that's not what I asked. Do you love him? As a woman loves a man. Mom, no beating around the bush, Rachel. The situation is too serious for half-truths. Rachel took a deep breath, finally confronting the feeling that had been growing in her chest for months. Yes, I love him. But that doesn't matter now. The important thing is to protect Michael. Dear, everything is connected. Mrs. Zelda adjusted herself in the armchair, grimacing in pain. This Augustus fellow is using our past, our humble origins to attack us. He'll say we're opportunists, that we're here for the money. But that's not true. We know that. But what about others? A judge, society? Her mother shook her head. People like us rarely get the benefit of the doubt when confronted with people like Augustus. Rachel felt tears sting her eyes. So what do you suggest? That we leave? That I abandon Michael when he needs me most? No. Mrs. Zelda held her daughter's hand with surprising firmness. I suggest that you and Julian talk honestly. If there are real feelings, face this together. If not, perhaps it's best to reconsider our position. The next morning, Rachel woke up determined to have that conversation with Julian. However, upon going down for coffee, she found the house in an uproar. Marcus, Julian's partner and closest friend, was in the office with him, and raised voices could be heard even with the door closed. Michael, sensing the tension, refused to eat, looking anxiously at the office door. What's happening? He signed to Rachel. Adult matters, she replied, trying to smile. Let's finish your breakfast. Mrs. Zelda, who was already at the table, cast a worried glance at her daughter. Something serious has happened. The phone hasn't stopped ringing since dawn. Moments later, Julian emerged from the office, his face pale and tense. Seeing Rachel and Michael, he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Good morning, champ. He approached Michael, signing with trembling hands. Daddy needs to sort some things out today. Can we postpone our outing until tomorrow? The boy nodded, observing his father with attentive eyes. Even at just 4 years old, Michael had developed a keen sensitivity to the emotional state of the adults around him. When Michael finished breakfast and went to play in the living room, supervised by Mrs. Zelda, Rachel approached Julian. What happened? He pointed to a magazine cover on the table. Rachel felt her stomach sink as she saw the headline, The Love Triangle at Montgomery Mansion. the housekeeper, the billionaire, and the deceased. My God. This is on every newsstand today. Julian looked exhausted. And there's more. Augustus gave an exclusive interview, claiming he has concrete evidence that our relationship began even before Claire's passing. That's an absurd lie, Rachel exclaimed, indignant. I didn't even know you before. I know. He took her hands. But Augustus is playing dirty. Very dirty. Marcus just told me that some investors are questioning my integrity. The company's shares fell 7% just this morning. Because of these lies? Because of the instability, the uncertainty. Julian sighed. In the business world, trust is everything. And Augustus is systematically undermining that. Rachel felt a wave of guilt wash over her. This is all because of me. If I weren't here No, Julian interrupted her firmly. Don't you dare think like that. You are the best thing that has happened to this family in a long time. His gaze was so intense that Rachel felt her breath catch. For a moment it seemed he would say more, perhaps even confess the feelings growing between them. But the moment was broken by Marcus's return. Julian, the lawyer, is on the line. We need to discuss the strategy for the hearing. The following days were a whirlwind. More sensationalist stories appeared daily. Photographers staked out the entrance of the gated community, waiting for candid shots. The phone wouldn't stop ringing with reporters seeking statements. Julian hired additional security and instructed all staff not to speak to the press. Michael, sensitive to the changes, became quieter, more anxious. He started having nightmares again, something that hadn't happened in months. The legal team worked tirelessly, preparing the defense for the preliminary hearing. Testimonies from doctors, speech therapists, and teachers attesting to Michael's extraordinary progress were collected. Mrs. Zelda would also be a key witness, speaking about Rachel's genuine devotion to the boy. 3 days before the hearing, Rachel found Julian in the garden late at night. He was looking at the stars, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his expression lost. "Can't sleep?" she asked, sitting beside him. "I'm afraid of losing everything, Rachel." His voice sounded vulnerable in a way she had never witnessed before. "Not the company, not the money. That doesn't matter. But Michael, this family we've built, you won't lose," she affirmed, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "The truth will prevail. It doesn't always prevail." He turned to face her, his eyes shining under the moonlight. "The lawyers think it would be better if you stepped away temporarily, until the dust settles." Rachel felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "What?" "They say Augustus is building his case mainly around you. If we remove that element from the equation, he loses strength." Julian spoke quickly, as if the words hurt him. "It's just a tactical suggestion, temporary." "And you agree with this?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. Julian closed his eyes for a moment, and when he reopened them, they were teary. "No, never. But I'm afraid, Rachel, afraid of losing Michael, that he'll be handed over to Augustus, a man who only cares about the money that comes with custody, that everything we've built will be destroyed. What would Michael say if he knew you were considering this?" The question hung between them like a silent accusation. Julian covered his face with his hands. "I'm being a coward, aren't I?" "You're being a father," Rachel replied, understanding despite the pain, "wanting to protect your son at all costs." They remained silent for long minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. "I can't ask you and Mrs. Zelda to go through this," Julian finally said. "It's not fair to expose you both to this media circus, to these infamous accusations." "And isn't it our decision?" Rachel looked at him. "Don't we have the right to choose our own battles?" "You do. Of course you do." He took her hand. "But I want you to know that no matter what you decide, I will understand and respect it." That night, Rachel barely slept. Julian's words echoed in her mind. Part of her wanted to stay and fight, to show Augustus and the world that they wouldn't be intimidated by lies. Another part feared the consequences for Michael, should they lose. And there was also the selfish fear that, if she left now, even temporarily, she would be giving Augustus exactly what he wanted. The next morning, after a sleepless night, she found Julian in the office, surrounded by legal documents. He looked up when she entered, and Rachel could see that he hadn't slept either. "I've made my decision. she said without preamble. "What is it?" His voice was hoarse, tense. "I'm leaving." Rachel felt the words tear at her throat. "I can't be the reason you lose Michael." Julian stood up abruptly, knocking papers over in the process. "Rachel, no. It's for the best." She tried to maintain her composure, but felt tears threatening to fall. "Mrs. Zelda and I will return to our old apartment until all this is over. You can tell the judge that we've severed any ties beyond the professional. And Michael?" Julian's voice cracked. How will we explain it to him? It was the question Rachel feared most, the one she had spent the night trying to answer. "We'll say I needed to take care of my mother, that I'll come back when I can." Her voice finally broke. "But we both know it will be a lie." Julian crossed the room and took her in his arms in a desperate embrace. "Don't do this. Please, we'll find another way." "There is no other way, Julian." She gently pulled away, wiping her tears. "The hearing is in 2 days. If I leave now, you'll have time to prepare your defense without me as a complicating factor. And what if I don't want a defense without you?" He held her face between his hands. "What if I tell you I love you, Rachel, that I can't imagine our life without you?" Her heart quickened, but reason prevailed. "Then I would say you need to choose between loving me and keeping your son." She covered his hands with hers, gently pushing them away. "And we both know what the right choice is." That same afternoon, with a broken heart and a face washed with tears, Rachel and Mrs. Zelda left the Montgomery mansion. Michael cried, clinging to Rachel's legs, not understanding why his family was being separated again. She promised to return, knowing it was a promise she likely couldn't keep. In the small apartment they had hastily rented, Rachel collapsed onto the sofa, emotionally and physically exhausted. "We did the right thing, dear." Mrs. Zelda tried to console her. A painful end is better than endless pain. But Rachel knew that wasn't an end. It was an emptiness that nothing would ever fill. An absence that would accompany her for the rest of her life. Michael, Julian, the family they almost had. In the early morning hours before the hearing, while Rachel had finally managed to fall asleep after hours of crying, the phone rang. It was Marcus, Julian's partner, sounding urgent and strangely excited. "Rachel, we need you at the office now. Something happened that could change everything." Rachel arrived at the law office at 3 in the morning, her heart racing and Mrs. Zelda by her side, insisting on accompanying her despite the hour and her fragile health. The commercial building in downtown New York City was practically empty, except for the light coming from the meeting room on the 20th floor. "What's going on, Marcus?" Rachel asked as soon as she entered the room, finding not only Julian's partner, but also 2 lawyers and a woman she didn't know, in a nurse's uniform. "Sorry to call you at this hour, Rachel." Marcus seemed euphoric despite his evident tiredness. "But we needed to speak with you before the hearing. This is Helen Sawyer, head nurse at St. Jude's Hospital." The woman, serious and professional in appearance, extended her hand to Rachel. "Miss Sterling, I've heard a lot about you." Helen worked with Claire throughout her entire hospitalization period before her passing. Marcus explained, "And she has something she needs to tell us, something that changes everything." Rachel sat down, confused. Mrs. Zelda settled beside her, holding her hand in a gesture of support. "Where's Julian?" Rachel asked, noticing his absence. "On his way. He was at the hospital with Michael." "The boy had a nervous breakdown after you left," Marcus replied, making Rachel feel a pang of guilt. "But that's not important now. Helen, please tell them what you told me." The nurse adjusted herself in her chair, adopting a professional posture. "I worked directly with Mrs. Claire Montgomery during the 9 months she was hospitalized with postpartum complications." She began. "During that period, I witnessed her suffering from being separated from her newborn son and Mr. Julian's dedication as he divided his time between the hospital, the company, and caring for Michael." Rachel nodded, still not understanding where this was leading. 2 days ago, I saw a news report about the custody lawsuit filed by Mr. Augustus Albright against Julian Montgomery." Helen continued. "In the article, Mr. Albright claimed that Julian had betrayed Claire's memory by getting involved with his son's caregiver. This deeply shocked me because I know it's a blatant lie." "What do you mean?" Mrs. Zelda asked. In her last months, Claire and I developed a friendship. She knew she wouldn't survive. The doctors had been honest with her about her chances. Helen's voice faltered slightly. In our conversations, Claire frequently expressed her concern for Julian and Michael's future. She feared that without a maternal figure, the boy would suffer. And she feared that Julian would isolate himself, taking on all the responsibility alone. Rachel felt her heart beat faster with each word. A week before she passed, Claire asked me to witness a document. It was a video recorded in her hospital room, a message for Julian to be delivered when he was ready to rebuild his life. A video? Rachel murmured. Yes. Helen opened the folder she was carrying and took out a USB drive. It's here. Claire made me swear I would only deliver it when I felt the time was right. When Julian and Michael found someone who would make them happy again. The lawyers exchanged meaningful glances. This video directly contradicts Augustus's allegations. The older lawyer explained, it proves that Claire not only accepted, but desired Julian to rebuild his life after her passing. Why didn't you show this before? Rachel asked the nurse. Because I promised Claire that I would wait for the right moment, Helen replied with simplicity. When I saw the news about the lawsuit, about how that man was using her memory against you, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. But that still doesn't explain why you called me here in the middle of the night. Rachel observed, confused. Marcus smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Because Claire makes a specific request in the video, something that can change everything, but it depends on you, Rachel. The room door opened at that moment, and Julian entered hastily. Upon seeing Rachel, his eyes lit up, but soon a shadow of uncertainty obscured them again. He looked exhausted, with deep dark circles under his eyes and unshaven. Rachel! His voice was almost a whisper. You came, Marcus called me. Said it was important. A tense silence settled in the room. Marcus was the first to break it. I think we all need to see the video now. He turned to Julian. Are you ready? Julian nodded, though he seemed apprehensive. One of the lawyers connected the USB drive to the computer and projected the image onto the white wall. Claire appeared on the screen. Pale, visibly weakened, but with a surprising serenity in her gaze. Rachel had never seen her before, except in photographs around the house. She felt a tightening in her chest seeing the woman whose absence had so profoundly marked Julian and Michael's lives. Julian, my love. Claire's voice sounded soft, almost ethereal. If you are seeing this video, it means that time has passed and that Helen, my faithful guardian, has decided the moment has come. I only hope it hasn't been too late. Julian sat down heavily, his eyes fixed on his wife's image. I know you are suffering. I know you are trying to be strong for Michael, and I know, my love, that you are probably feeling guilty for moving on. Claire smiled sadly. But I want you to know that this is exactly what I wish for you. That you move on, that you find happiness again, that our son has a complete family. Silent tears streamed down Julian's face. I'm afraid, Julian, afraid that you will close yourself off to love, that you will eternally punish yourself for something that was no one's fault, afraid that Michael will grow up without knowing the warmth of a true home, just because you feel obligated to preserve my memory. Claire paused, breathing with difficulty. Therefore, I leave here my last request, my last will. Be happy. Allow yourself to love again. Give Michael the chance to have a mother who loves him as I would have loved him. And when you find that special person, do not feel guilty, do not hesitate. Take her as your partner with my blessing. She smiled, a luminous smile despite her physical fragility. And for you, the woman who will one day read Julian and Michael's lives, I ask that you love them with all the strength of your heart, that you have patience with the shadows of the past that will sometimes haunt them, and that you know that, wherever I am, I will be happy for the three of you to form the family I could not give them. The video ended definitively, leaving the room in a profound, almost sacred silence. Rachel had tears in her eyes, as did everyone present. Mrs. Zelda squeezed her hand tightly, moved. Claire was an extraordinary woman, Nurse Helen commented softly. Until the very end, her greatest concern was your happiness. Julian wiped away his tears, visibly shaken. Why didn't you show me this before? Because Claire made me promise that I would wait until you were truly ready to start over. Helen replied, When I saw the news about the lawsuit, about how that man was using her memory against you. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. One of the lawyers spoke up. This video completely invalidates Augustus's central argument. Claire clearly expresses her desire for Julian to rebuild his life. No judge could argue that you are betraying her memory after seeing this, but there's still the question of Rachel's suitability as a maternal figure for Michael. The other lawyer pondered. Augustus will certainly try to attack from that angle, questioning her training, her experience. That's where Claire's request comes in. Marcus intervened. At the end of the video, there's a part we haven't shown yet. A part specifically addressed to you, Rachel. Everyone turned to the computer again. Claire's image reappeared, now with an even more serene expression. There's something else I want to say, something that might seem strange, but that I feel deep in my soul, she began. To the woman who finds my family, who brings light back into their lives, I have a special request. Legally adopt my son. Rachel gasped, surprised. I know it seems presumptuous of me to make such a significant request to someone I don't even know, but I feel that if you have won Julian and Michael's hearts, you must be someone extraordinary, someone I can trust with the most precious treasure I leave in this world. Claire took a deep breath before continuing. In my will, I included a specific clause. If Julian remarries, and if his new wife legally adopts Michael, full control of the trust fund I left for my son immediately passes to both of you, removing any interference from my birth family. Julian's eyes widened. I didn't know that. I never read the full will, because Augustus, as executor, never allowed it. Marcus completed. He only showed you the parts that interested him. Claire continued in the video. I did this because I know my family, especially my cousin Augustus. I know they will try to control Michael through money. I know they will use the trust as a form of manipulation, and I don't want that for my son. I want him to be raised with love, not with financial interests. She smiled once more. So my final request is this. If you truly love Julian and Michael, if you wish to form a family with them, adopt my son. Legally become his mother. Not just to protect him from Augustus, but to give him the maternal love I won't be able to give. The video ended definitively, leaving the room in silence again. Rachel was stunned, her heart beating wildly. Julian looked at her intensely, a mixture of hope and fear in his eyes. This changes everything, one of the lawyers commented, breaking the silence. With this video and the revelation of the wills clause, Augustus completely loses his argument, especially if he looked meaningfully at Rachel and Julian. If you formalize your relationship and begin the adoption process, would the judge allow that? Mrs. Zelda asked, concerned. I mean, we're simple people without connections. With this video, it would be difficult to deny. The lawyer replied confidently. Claire specifically asks for this. It is her last will, officially recorded with a respectable witness. He indicated Helen. Furthermore, we have medical and educational reports attesting to Michael's extraordinary progress under Rachel's care. Julian finally spoke, turning to face Rachel directly. I don't want you to do this out of obligation, or just to defeat Augustus. His voice was laden with emotion. I want you to do it only if it's truly what you desire. Rachel took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. Everything was happening so fast. 2 days ago, she was saying goodbye, believing she would never see Michael and Julian again. Now she was being invited to officially become part of that family. I need to know one thing first, she said, looking at Julian. What do you truly want? Without thinking about Michael, about Augustus, or even about Claire, what do you, Julian Montgomery, desire for your life? The room fell into absolute silence. All eyes turned to Julian, who did not hesitate. I want you, Rachel. I want us to form a family. Not for legal convenience, not because of money or the lawsuit, but because I love you, because I can't imagine my life without you. The words, simple and direct, made Rachel's heart swell in her chest. Then my answer is yes. She smiled through tears. Yes to everything. To be with you, to be Michael's mother, to face Augustus together. Yes to the family we can be. Julian crossed the room with long strides and took her in his arms, in an embrace that seemed to want to make up for all the days of separation. When their lips met for the first time, Rachel felt as if she had finally come home after a long journey. Mrs. Zelda discreetly wiped away her tears, a smile of pure happiness illuminating her wrinkled face. So it's decided. Marcus clapped his hands once, bringing everyone back to reality. Tomorrow at the hearing, we will present the video and announce the official engagement and the intention to adopt. Augustus will have no way to contest it. The next morning, the courthouse was packed. Journalists crowded at the entrance, eager to capture the arrival of the parties involved in the case that had dominated headlines in recent weeks. Augustus was already inside, surrounded by a team of expensive lawyers, and with a confident expression that would soon transform. When Julian arrived, hand in hand with Rachel, followed by Mrs. Zelda, Michael and Helen flashes erupted. Ignoring the questions yelled by reporters, the group entered the courtroom directly. The judge, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, began the session promptly. Augustus was the first to present his case, through his lead attorney. As expected, he focused on the improper relationship between Julian and Rachel, Michael's negative exposure, and the betrayal of Claire's memory. When it was the defense's turn, Julian's lawyer simply asked permission to show a video. The judge, intrigued, authorized it. As soon as Claire's image appeared on the screen and her first words sounded in the room, Augustus's face lost all color. At the end of the screening, a heavy silence filled the room. The judge, visibly moved, removed his glasses to wipe his eyes before speaking. I believe this video completely clarifies the wishes of the deceased Mrs. Montgomery regarding the future of her husband and son. He looked directly at Augustus. Mr. Albright, in light of this new evidence, do you maintain your petition for custody review? Augustus, cornered, quickly consulted his lawyers before responding. Your Honor, out of respect for my cousin's memory, I withdraw the petition. Very sensible. The judge nodded. However, given the questionable methods employed by you in this case, including the dissemination of defamatory information in the media and the concealment of relevant parts of the will, I order an investigation into your actions as trustee of the fund left for the minor Michael Montgomery. Augustus paled even further. Furthermore, the judge continued, I provisionally grant Mr. Julian Montgomery and his fiancée, Rachel Sterling, the right to immediately initiate the adoption process of the minor by Ms. Sterling, as explicitly desired by the biological mother in her will. With a bang of the gavel, the hearing was adjourned. Augustus left hastily, avoiding journalists and ignoring his own lawyer's attempts to speak with him. His defeat was complete and humiliating. Outside the room, Michael waited anxiously with Mrs. Zelda. Upon seeing Julian and Rachel emerge hand in hand with radiant smiles, the boy ran to them. Julian lifted him into his arms and, together with Rachel, signed the good news. We're going to be a family forever. Michael hugged them both simultaneously, his small body conveying all the joy that words spoken or signed could never fully express. 6 months later, the Montgomery mansion was decorated for a special celebration. In the spacious garden, white chairs were arranged in a semicircle around a floral arch. Select guests, close friends, colleagues, doctors, and therapists who had accompanied Michael awaited the start of the ceremony. Mrs. Zelda, in a turquoise blue dress chosen especially for the occasion, waited proudly beside the improvised altar. Her health had significantly improved in recent months, thanks to the specialized treatment she now received. Beside her, Helen, the nurse who had changed everything with her courage and loyalty, smiled, moved. To the sound of soft music, Rachel appeared at the beginning of the aisle formed between the chairs. Her dress, simple but elegant, shimmered under the afternoon sun. Her eyes, however, sparkled even more as they met Julian waiting for her at the altar, with Michael by his side holding the rings. As she walked slowly towards her future, Rachel reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her there, from an overworked cleaner to a mother and wife, from a small apartment in the urban outskirts to a family that transcended any conventional definition. The moment she stood beside Julian and Michael, the latter tugged on her hand and signed, his little eyes sparkling. Now you're going to be my mom forever. Rachel, with tears of joy, signed back, forever. The officiant began the ceremony, but for the three at the altar, Julian, Rachel, and Michael, the most significant moment had already happened. They were finally complete, finally home. When it was time for the vows, Julian took Rachel's hands in his. "I promise to honor not only our love, but also the trust Claire placed in us. I promise to build with you the family Michael deserves, full of love, understanding, and respect. And I promise every day to thank destiny for having placed you on our path." That night, when everything seemed lost, Rachel, moved, replied, "I promise to love Michael as if he were my own son with all my heart. I promise to be by your side in good times and bad, building together a story that began in the most unexpected way possible. And I promise never to forget that our family was not formed by blood or by chance, but by a conscious choice of love." After the exchange of rings, Michael surprised everyone by signing, "I also want to make a promise." With gestures still childlike, but full of feeling, he continued, "I promise to love my father and my new mother forever. I promise to be a good son. And I promise to always remember Mommy Claire who brought us together." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden when the three embraced, sealing a family pact that transcended any convention. The party that followed was joyful and relaxed. Mrs. Zelda, seated in a place of honor, watched with satisfaction as her daughter danced with Julian, both with smiles that lit up their faces. Michael ran among the guests, dragging his new friends from the special school for the deaf he now attended. As evening fell, while the garden lights came on and soft music filled the air, Julian and Rachel found a moment to be alone in a quiet corner. "We're a real family now," he said, embracing her by the waist. "We always were," she replied, resting her head on his chest. "We just needed to realize it." In the starry sky above them, a particularly bright star seemed to twinkle with greater intensity. Rachel liked to think it was Claire, watching with approval the family she had helped form even after she had passed. Michael ran over, pulling Rachel's hand to sign something important. "Grandma Zelda is calling. It's time for cake." The three walked back to the party, united not only by intertwined hands, but by an invisible bond forged through pain, overcoming adversity, and above all, unconditional love. Love that recognized no barriers of class, origin, or blood. A love that had transformed a silent and empty house into a vibrant and welcoming home. And so, under the stars of New York City, the Montgomery Sterling family celebrated not just a matrimonial union, but the triumph of love over prejudice, of truth over manipulation, and of the family we choose to form over the one we are born into. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that Julian and Rachel's story has touched your hearts as much as it touched ours. There is always a possible new beginning, even when everything seems lost. Stories like this remind us that true love overcomes any barrier, and that families are formed much more by daily choices of love than by blood ties. If you were moved by this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share it with someone who needs a message of hope today. In the comments, tell us, have you ever witnessed or lived a story of new beginnings as powerful as this one? Remember, to access our complete playlist with other emotional stories like this, just click the link in the description. We'll be back tomorrow with another narrative that will touch your heart. Until then,